Good afternoon, team.
Good afternoon.
I hope you all have had a great Friday. I'm so happy that you all joined. I have a few documents that I want to pass out to you so we can continue on with our analysis of the MOCK Algebra I exam. So I did print off the results. Although we do have it in a spreadsheet, I wanted us to have something in front of us so we can use it as a quicker reference. Thanks. And then I also printed off the snapshot and the misconceptions that we will be talking about today as we develop our plan. All right. Okay. Our students took the MOCK Algebra I exam that we created in Eduphoria, and we've already received the results. So the paper in front of you that has the MOCK Algebra I EOC, the student expectation learning breakdown. This is what we've been discussing, but as I said before, I put it in print form so we can better see. Mr. Raimond had already gone through for us and highlighted those SEs that were below 50%, but he went as far as highlighting the red that was below 25%, and then the yellow are the SEs that were below 50%. From that, we derived that we were going to actually focus on SE A2A, A2C, and A3B, which are those readiness standards that we were going to really focus in on. And we identified that those standards deal with domain and range, writing linear, two variable equations, and calculating slope from a table, graph, and formula, and also real world. And since we're going to have our AVID and our physics teacher helping us, we had also broken it down even further because our students do struggle with graphing, and since they do go over graphing in physics, that would be an excellent category to have Mr. Miller work with us on. And since all students that are in algebra also are in physics, that is a win-win. And then with AVID, we decided that Ed Ready that they're working on will only be on Friday since it's focused more on TSI2 and not STAAR. And so the other 2 days that they're in AVID, they'll be working on Ed Ready, or no, they'll be working on Delta Math or Khan Academy, and that's what we're gonna hash out today. So that is where we left off. So today, I'm gonna turn it over to Ms. Mason, who has developed a PowerPoint to kind of guide us in continuing to develop our plan. Now, I also provided for you the misconceptions. So as we go through her PowerPoint, we will be discussing common misconceptions and how we can address those. And we will also be looking at those standards and making sure that we're focusing on the readiness standards as we develop our plan. So, you know, when we're talking about data-driven instruction, which is known as DDI, we're always looking to see it, do it, and then follow up. So our seeing it is our focus. So we have put our SEs that we're going to be focusing on up, and we're going to start narrowing down that focus so we can develop our plan to do it. So, Ms. Mason?
Okay. All right. So first, I believe most of you saw the slideshow that I'm working on, which, if I can get my mouse to work normally. Here we go. All right. So this is going to be what I go through and Ms. Thompson goes through in our algebra class and classes. We're going to have warm-ups that are clustered per sort of teach group. So this first group is A2 and A3. We have 3 questions that I grouped together. I am going to, as Mr. Raimond recommended, put a little block over if there's sometimes answer choices or drop downs. I'm going to block those out so we can have a few open-ended questions and discussion before we get down to a specific answer choice.
Okay. Ms. Mason, I'm going to stop you there. If you all will look at your quick start guide on Algebra I, and if you turn it over just so we know that we're all on the same page, if you look at the bottom, there's a box that says, have we prepared students to respond to different item types? So instead of having all multiple choice questions on the reviews that she's going over, we wanna make sure that we hit all of these. So which item type is this?
Well, in the original test,
In the original test, sorry, it was the drop down. So
Okay.
they click on the arrows, they see all the options, and they select
Okay.
which one goes in each blank, pretty much.
So this is gonna be a drop down as well?
no, as we go through this warm-up, we're gonna have a discussion about this array, and then we'll go through the range, and how they can calculate range, choose the correct answer from the drop-down. So this is gonna be more what you would call a free response answer. Since the way that I have formed this, there's no way for it to be a drop-down.
Okay, so that is A2A, which is one of our focus SCs. I have 4 A2A questions that I pulled from Lead Forward. And what we're gonna do before she goes on, we're gonna actually go through and complete what students should know and what should students show. So Ms. Mason will have an idea of what to look for when she starts going through this with her students. So let's go ahead and choose the one on the first page, which says it's 2023, question 46. The domain and range of part of linear function are given. X is greater than 5, Y is less than 2, which graph best could represent the part of the linear function R. So let's popcorn out. What do students need to know?
Well, right off the bat, they have to be familiar with inequality symbols and know what they mean, because if they don't know that, then they're not gonna know how to read it and know that it's referring to X is greater than 5.
Okay,
So
need to know inequality symbols,
They need to know the definition of domain and range.
definition of domain and range. Okay. Anything else? What else do they need to know to be successful on this problem for A2A?
It doesn't, you wouldn't need to know based on the answer choices displayed, but it says linear function, so they'd have to know if it was a linear function. They could potentially put like some linear functions and some quadratic functions. And they
Okay.
need to know that they wouldn't choose the quadratic one.
All right, so they need to know what a linear function is, or the difference between a linear function and a quadratic function. Do they need to know any calculations on this particular problem?
not really, they have to know how to read a graph. That's what-
Okay, they need to know how to read a graph. Do you think they need to know anything about slope?
I don't think so.
Not for this
Not for
problem.
this problem.
Okay,
They do need to know, not necessarily know, but understand they need to pay very close attention to the difference in the answer choices, cause B and D, are so close, if they weren't paying attention, they might pick the wrong one. Cause one's greater than, one's less than, for Y.
And to not confuse domain and range, because I haven't looked yet, but I'm imagining there's one that's just flipping the two, the definitions of the two.
okay, I wanna go back up to what Ms. Lydie was saying. The difference between B and D, one is,
One is for Y, it
Mhm.
is greater than 2, that's D. The answer is B, which is less than 2.
okay,
And just really focusing and making sure that they just don't jump and mark an answer and they weren't paying attention. 'Cause
Okay.
If they can pick between B and D, they understand the concept, they just weren't paying attention to the answer choices.
all right, so they need to know the direction of the arrow, what that means. When is it greater than, when is it less than? And if you look at the correct answer opposed to, the two that were the, most chosen, it looks like they chose A and C equally almost. Why do you think they did that? Is it because maybe they were only looking at X, or because X has to be greater than 5, but on those two, it's not greater than 5. So where do you think they messed up? Because we need to be able to address that.
Maybe they didn't understand which way the inequality was facing for A, so you know, it should be greater than 5, but they chose less than 5, so just not understanding, you know, which way the alligator's facing.
Okay, which way the alligator is facing. So we said inequality symbols, so we actually need to delve deeper. It's not just knowing the symbol, but actually knowing which side is the most. Because the symbol can go either way, but if you know the open end is always the greater. We just need to make sure that we touch upon that. And so looking at some of the misconceptions here on the leap forward misconceptions page that I provided. A2A is down at the bottom, and it goes through confusing X and Y values, that's what Ms. Mason said. Confusing domain and range, confusing which inequality symbol to use to represent a closed or an open circle. Let me see, switching values.
Yeah, so that would be another thing. If some of the answer choices had a closed circle, they would have to know the difference between.
Okay. So I'm gonna put difference between open and closed circle. But because up in the problem, X is greater than 5, Y is less than 2, it's only one type of symbol, so I guess they wouldn't necessarily need it on this problem. All right, so on this particular problem, if they know these items, they should be able to do a process of elimination. So in class, if you're going over a problem like this, instead of just having students give the answer, what can they show you on their paper to let you know, okay, they got an idea of what to do on this problem, because they can articulate to me that I see the open circle is at 3.
Okay.
X is equal to 3, Y is equal to -4. So I know I would want them to show me the coordinates to give me, so I'll know, okay, they at least know where it's located. I would want them to give me what kind of slope it is, because that will give an indication. Do you understand? Is it increasing from left to right, decreasing? How does that look when you start writing values? Because if it's decreasing, then that makes your value negative. So those are things I would want them to show. What are other things that they can show?
Well, it depends on if we're going into maybe some other teaks as we look at this. So, like, all right, so for example, slope, or even calculating slope with the beginning and end points and using the formula for that, we could go into that with this question. It wasn't necessarily the focus of this particular question, but we could do that.
Okay.
And use, you know, y minus y over x minus x to solve for slope. That's doable.
All right, so as you and Ms. Thompson plan to deliver this to the students, make sure that you actually write down what it is you intend for the students to show. If it is a formula, and that is what you're trying to derive from them, then make sure you kind of write that either down in your notes, just so you can guide them in the direction that you want them to go. Because some students will do an educated guess and get the right answer, but you want to make sure they know the process, so when they see it again, they know exactly what to do. That problem uses the equation. However, the problem I gave you didn't necessarily need an equation, but I would still want them to label the X and Y values, let me know if the slope is increasing or decreasing, because that also helps with the inequality value.
And then I would add to
On the
that.
actual test itself, I would have them to mark the y-axis, that they have to know what the range means, mark the y-axis. Then take the dot, whatever the symbol is, you move it over to that y-axis. So that's a dot, you bring the open circle over to the -4, and that is your domain.
So you do,
Okay.
would you do?
Is there any way to
dashes?
write that down to make that visual?
Kind of like making a
Yeah.
vertical number line for the range.
You can do this on, this poster board here, the mock algebra 1 exam, and
This one?
Uh-huh,
Okay.
for
I'm sorry.
A2A. Did you have any more poster paper?
Yes, I have a lot. Let me grab you a whole.
Or she's gonna
Want me
get
to put it right here?
she's gonna get a poster paper.
Oh, okay.
And what you're gonna put is what they need to show for this 2023 Q7.
And the reason I'm saying that is when they are actually taking that test, they need to, and I think it's awesome outside of class, they're learning other things, but for the test, their mind needs to be very focused on what am I doing for this problem?
Okay,
Cause they get worn out,
right,
they get
Right.
totally worn out. So for the test, the actual EOC part, and I think it's great that we incorporate other things as we're getting there, but. Okay, so. Okay, so that's gonna be -2, 2, and then down here.
3 is a -4.
Okay, so what I have them do is when it says range, they mark, which they'll have to be working on their own paper, their scratch paper, but they mark that axis. Then, whatever the symbols are, you bring that over to whatever you have highlighted. So that's a closed, that's an open, and now I know that it is between 2 and -4. So it just kind of is kind of straightforward a little bit more than. But again, as you're working toward the test part, I think it's great that you incorporate the other things too.
okay.
But maybe
So I like
emphasize,
that you brought that up, and the PowerPoint is good, but now we're wanting to discuss strategy that's gonna be the most impactful, because we have on here that this was one of their lowest. So going in and just teaching them the equation may not work for everyone, so I'm glad that Ms. Lyday did share another way to just, visually draw the line from the point to what it's asking for, which is the range, which is the y-axis, and then you can visually see the difference between the two.
and with the kids that I have worked with, they get tired very easily because there's a lot of it that they do not know, so it just keeps them from getting so tired at the end.
Okay.
You know?
Sometimes I do the dashed lines over, so I mean, we could show them both, but same idea.
Yeah, same thing.
Did you have this problem up? I think that is your slide number, your next one, yeah. So this is the problem we were just talking about. Mr. Raymond, you had a comment?
I was gonna share kind of along what you were saying, when I coach for SAT, and when I coach for the actual AP exam, I tell my students that when you get to a new problem, the first thing you should do is find the question. Don't read anything else about the problem.
Absolutely.
Just look for the question itself. So on the test, you go back one. I tell them, when you see this, don't even look at the graph at all. Find out what the question is and then go back and read. That way, because if you read the start of the question and you look at the graph, by the time you find out what the question is, you're going to have forgotten what everything else in the problem was.
I agree, that was my strategy for SAT students, yes. So some test taking strategy built into these is a wonderful idea. In fact, Dr. White, are you writing that down?
I'm gonna it sounds like part of our plan is moving forward is to teach our students strategies.
Perfect.
Okay. Strategies. Read the question first.
Well, it's more like find the question first.
Okay.
Because they need to find out what the question, because you can call the whole thing the question, but they need to find out what the problem is actually asking them to do
Okay.
before they read anything else.
All right, so this particular problem was strictly asking for range. And then from there, look at the dots, identify what axis is range. That's something else we gotta make sure our students know.
Mark that.
Because information overload is, I would say, a key enemy in a timed test. And
Yes.
even though I don't know for sure, is STAAR, is it?
It's untimed,
Okay,
it's untimed.
but they're still gonna get tired after a certain amount of
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And that's why, I tell mine, if you can do it on Desmos, you need to do it on Desmos. You don't even think about anything else. If it says equivalent, there is a way to do it, that's what you need to do.
So is this a Desmos problem?
No, that's not, but
Okay.
that's something we teach in that boot camp.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
but it's not, you could not do that on Desmos.
Okay, so we've gone through now the first and then quickly recapping the second problem that you put up. That's on the handout that I gave. We identified what students need to know, which are, the inequality symbols and the difference between the greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, less than, equal to, and what that looks like on the graph. Definition of domain. And
Right, I
range.
would do the same thing, but you have two different. So the first thing I would look for are the domain. And, I look at the graphs and it looks like all of them start, this is an open. That's always an open. So that's 5, and then, I guess on that one you kinda
Yeah,
would
they all
have,
start at
have to
5.
go a little bit more before you got started, but it's still the same thing. For my domain, it would be, if I do this one, my domain would be at 5, and I would put an arrow down on that end.
Mhm,
So that would be less than, they should know that's not it.
mhm.
For the C, I bring a down 5, I open it, I put the arrow because that's what, is on that line. And so that's still less than, does that make sense?
Mhm.
So here I would do an arrow, a circle at 5, but you see how that arrow, when I bring it up to the x-axis, is going that way. So
So
these
it's
two
actually
would be
greater
the
than.
only one that's greater than, I would narrow it down to those two.
Mhm.
Does that even make sense?
Yeah, for the X's, you're
Okay.
talking about
So-
the X's, yeah.
So
Okay,
it
and
sounds-
then,
It sounds like they need to know, the direction of the axes, which
Yes,
is, you know,
yes.
positive is
Uh-huh.
increasing to the right and it's decreasing to the left.
and be able to eliminate choices is another. And so I'm down to B and D based upon the X, and now for the Y, it's this one. On B, it's an open circle on Y, 2, and then it's a down arrow, so that's less than. Over here, it's an open circle on 2, but an arrow above it, so that's greater than, so that's why it would do that. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
So I have a question, have you ever taught it, like,
Do you need a clean piece?
maybe,
Where did you
For
put
the-
it?
Is it where you do the box thing? 'Cause I've
I
also
think
seen
kind
it-
of,
I've also
I
seen it
was-
that way.
more talking about for this particular problem. So it's, rather than, cause time isn't, not time as in they've got a time, but time is in fatigue in their brain.
Yes,
If they're doing that, X is greater than 5 and Y is less than 2, mark these on the graph. So what are the things that are greater than 5 with open circle in this way, and then
yeah, I
2,
could, yeah, I could see it.
open circle, and then down.
So it's the
So which-
combination of
yeah,
both of
combination
those,
of
yes,
those.
bring them together and then, I like that, I think that's good too.
Alright.
I like that, and also that would go well with the plan of covering up the answer choices to start with, so that could be
Uh-huh.
something we do without seeing anything. The last thing I would say is, Miss Library, I was thinking verbally of what you were pointing out, so I just wrote next to the X, goes right, cause it's a greater than symbol, I put goes right. Next to the Y, since it's a less than symbol, I put goes down. So I just know I'm
Right and
going
down.
right and down.
Yeah, that's kind of what you were saying, yeah, I like that.
Okay, and then basically, so this isn't all that I figured we'd talk about today, but this is gonna be something I use regularly for warm-ups, and then after the grouping of questions, you'll see, this is a start on the answers that are already given in, the database where we got this from. But I can add to it discussion, so this is just, you know, number 7, that first question, this is what they were looking for originally for the correct answer, but we can add to this as we're thinking of, good questions to go through, like, if we wanted to add slope for that first one here, you know, I could put that in, things like that, we could just add to the answer slides. Does that make sense? Okay, and then I also wanted to make sure we have all of the data available that we might talk about today. So here I had added, what Dr. White had put, let's see, it was.
Algebra I data, the top.
The top, okay, so, alright, so I had added, Dr. White had posted this for us, and I put it in here with the same group, and then we've got the STAAR standards,
Which is this?
which is that. And then the thing that I added last night, student learning standards responses. This I think is gonna be very helpful for creating, the groups on Delta Math. So you see here, you have the students' names and then exactly their percentage on each of the TEKs. It doesn't go by individual question, and in that sense, I think it's better, cause all I'm looking at are the summary of each TEK.
So where there's 100%, you would not assign that particular TEK in Delta Math? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, wondering, because the TEKs have multiple representations, if the student got the one that was tested correct, but didn't have practice on the other, style that it can be presented in, how can we make sure that they get practice on that? Is this just for Delta Math, to be used in Avid, and then when we do our boot camp, we're gonna make sure we hit all? Is that your
Yeah,
thought?
so,
Okay.
so this is what I'm planning to use for my individual student Delta Math assignments, which they can work on inside of, Avid and or physics, depending on if those teachers want to give them some time sometimes for that. And then separately, I think, Ms. Blanco was gonna talk about some plans for the boot camp.
Yeah, so,
Before you get into the boot camp, my question was, if you'll go back to the PowerPoint you made, what was your thought behind these problems? Is it one per class period at the beginning of the class? Or are you trying to give them all of these and you're gonna create a PowerPoint each class period? What is your thought behind that?
My thought is about 3 most of the time as a warm-up each class. And so going through, so for example, the first warm-up would be question 7, and then this actually there wasn't enough space for the question number, but this next question, and this question 1. So this would be a warm-up for one day. We'd go through our answers and be done with the warm-up and move on to new instruction.
Okay.
And then I have them grouped out, so the next 3 would be here, and then the answers and so forth.
All right.
You tried to group those, each 3 by similar TEKs, right?
Exactly. They're already in the data. They're already grouped by TEKs. So that was already done for me.
Yeah.
I just broke them down and I kept them in that same grouping. And so there's just every now and then there's like a group of 4 just to keep the TEKs in the right clusters.
And you're gonna, the first, you'll go over it algebraically.
Yes,
And
and
then-
show Desmos.
Okay, then show, if it's on the EOC, we're gonna use Desmos for that.
And I think that will also be something Ms. Blanco might touch on when she's talking about the boot camp, because I know that you're gonna have more expertise in explaining the steps for Desmos.
All right, suggestion. To help build the student's stamina, what do you think about, instead of just putting the problem up and having them work the problem, putting the problem up and having them brainstorm like we did? What do we need to know? Point out things in this graph that will help you answer this question before they derive the answer. Because you want them to see, when they come to a problem like this, there are key things that should stick out. I don't know, what do you all think about that?
So, I've had times where I've tried to do that,
Okay,
but the students, they won't want to,
they don't wanna do it.
they don't wanna do it. So, a way you can get around that, now, I don't think you probably wouldn't have all the time to do that. So it would just be a few problems, but what you can do is cover up the question and using the prompt, ask students to write questions based on the prompt.
Oh, that's good.
So ask
Okay.
students to come up with, like, so that first one that we had looked at,
This
there's lots of,
Wait, no, it's not that one. Oh, sorry, we're lower down.
it doesn't really matter, you can,
Okay, so demonstrate or walk me through that so I can follow you.
so one of the things that you said we wanted them to notice about this one is, well, we wanna know the endpoints, we wanna know things like the slope, we wanna know things like X and Y intercepts. So we could cover up the question, and instead of asking them to identify those, cover this up and say, what questions could be asked about this? And then the students can brainstorm questions which will point them to what we want them to know about that.
Okay,
Do they participate in that?
I feel like they participate in that more readily than just asking them, what do you notice about the graph? Cause then it's like they're kind of building questions to quiz each other.
right.
And they could even do that in pairs, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
question and then the answer, sort of back
Yeah.
and forth.
And you could even try and get them to compete to see who makes the hardest question.
Mm-hmm,
Mm.
mm-hmm.
We did that for the,
I like that.
T.
I'm gonna, should
That's
we,
good, I like that.
Yeah, I do that with 80 questions.
so it could
Yeah.
be, actually, let me get a real Sharpie here.
Now, doing it that way does take a while.
Well, but when you think about it, what's more important, that the students get something before they leave, or to go through an activity? Because a lot of times we get so caught up in getting through the activity to where the kids don't get anything. So I would much rather some time be spent, we already know this is an area they need help in. Some time is spent to ensure that they understand and can have a discussion about it, opposed to just completing 10 problems to say, well, we went over A2A, and they still don't get it. So I do want you to keep that in mind. I know that there's a lot of work to cover, but the whole purpose of doing the mock exam was to kind of see where we can start focusing and targeting our energy to help students better understand.
Okay. The broader we go with the questions though, the more teaks we would cover that are outside of the particular weak areas that we want to focus on. So I would probably set like a time limit to make sure that we take it a little broader.
Well, but I'm glad you brought that up. And one thing in math, especially algebra, when you teach things in isolation, the students never get the connection. So if you can discuss as much as you can about that one problem so they can see, oh, even though it's asking about range, there are so many other things that fit this that I've learned in my classes.
Yeah.
So the more you can connect is actually the better. A2A is our foundation.
And if we have Fridays where it works, we could take this as a whole class and do something where it's more extensive like that. Like, I mean, more activity where they're generating questions and pairs and such.
And what we're trying to do is generate thinkers, because by the time they get to AP Calculus, they need to be able to think through a problem. It's not just about calculation anymore. And it starts here. Yes, it's a graph, yeah, you got two endpoints, an open circle and a closed circle, but what are all the things that can represent? So I think that should be our focus moving forward, and then when we get to our 10-day boot camp, they still don't have it, yeah, we're gonna do Desmos.
Yeah.
You don't have it? Desmos. Okay, so you're planning to do the first 3 slides the week we come back?
Actually, if we have a regular week, which do we have a full 5-day week?
I think we have a 5-day week that week, but then it's only 3 days the week after that.
So for
Yes.
example, on
Yeah.
a regular 5-day week, I would have 3 days with each class. And so we would have 3 groups really. So for example, we'd go through this group, 1, 2, 3, and then that would be our Monday warm up. Then Wednesday warm up would be the next group, which is these 3, bump, bump, bump. And then our Friday, we actually might go more into it if we decide that that's something that would fit into the schedule and wouldn't take out too much instructional time. We could do Friday would be this, and this, and we could go further into these where we block out. I mean, I am gonna put blocks in front of these answer choices for all of them anyway. But Friday we could spend more time doing the generating questions and pairs and answering them and seeing if we can come up with the hardest question.
Now, something that Mr. Raimond does real well is use half sheets in his class, or sometimes you use 4th sheets, right?
Yeah, well, those, like, I'll print one problem and I don't wanna spend a whole page on it.
Right, and I'm thinking in this case, because even though you're gonna display it, I think the kids should have something in front of them, even if it's a 4th sheet, it can be glued into their notebook, because they're supposed to be keeping it anyway. Glued into their notebook, and they can write all the stuff we're talking about around that problem to make it a more rich experience.
So when you say half sheets,
You reduce it down to 25%, so this is at 100%, if I reduced it to 25%,
okay.
it'll be here. Or you can, when you go to print, as far as a PDF is concerned, print 4 per page.
Okay, okay.
and it'll make it smaller,
Mhm.
but they can follow along with you. You'll have it displayed, you're talking, but they also have it here, and they can draw arrows and write and do that.
Okay.
And that way you don't have to worry about them copying things down incorrectly. And, you know, those that have a hard time seeing up there, they have it in front. But we wanna really start getting them dissecting these problems and realizing, oh, I can do this. Okay. Anything else? Because A2A, which also ties to A5A that we talked about yesterday, you can write it up there. That's gonna get us through until the end of March. But each time we come together in our PLC, we can expand this further.
Okay.
Ms. Blanco, you were gonna talk about the 10-day plan?
Oh, wait, just one more thing I wanted to add, is just in case you wanted to see what's available here, here are the Delta Math, for algebra topics, and so as we go through, the idea for individual students, when I showed you,
And you can
Yes.
assign them individually?
yes. And so as we go through, we're gonna try to connect some of these teaks where they have zeros to hopefully a corresponding Delta Math assignment. And so this is what we would have access to. And then from there, also with this subscription, they can access videos about each of these topics as well. If they get anything wrong or they need assistance, it's all built in.
So right now, based on our last meeting, since we said that we wanted Mr. Miller in his physics class to go over A3B, A3C, and A3D, do you wanna go ahead and do a blanket assignment to all students so they're able to access that when they're outside of class?
Starting
Or-
for the Monday they come back?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. So let's see, A3,
It's up there on the board, yeah.
okay.
So those all deal with graphs. And maybe we can just do one per week, and it won't be so much. I think we're gonna start off with A3B. And then,
Yeah, cause that one is calculating rate of change from the different contexts,
Mhm.
like from tables, from a graph, and then algebraically.
yeah, and that will go
Okay.
along with what he's doing in his class. So maybe A3B, assigning only one SE, so the students don't get so overwhelmed. So that will be reinforced in his class, and it also can be reinforced in Avid, where they're actually, doing it there.
Okay, so,
Okay.
for example, here, I don't know if we can look it up by T, but since rate of change is slope, I can look up slope, and then I can assign, finding the slope graphically, finding the slope from points, and then standard to slope, well, actually, that would be a different T, but these first two at least would correspond with that.
Yeah, and I would do one at a time so you don't overwhelm the student. And, you know, they can work on that in Avid, work on that in physics, and then when you come back here, if they still have questions, then you can go over that, but you're also going over what you plan to do in here. And we will also, I would encourage you to develop some sort of checkpoint, once we go over the PowerPoint that you just went over for 3 days. Have some sort of quiz or checkpoint to ensure that they understand, but make sure on that quiz, they're writing down and fleshing out the problem just like we're gonna have them do in the notebook. It won't just be an answer.
Let's see. So periodic quizzes.
I would say every 3 class periods if,
So maybe every Friday-ish?
well, you know, we're gonna have that funky week. So just gauge, and you'll be in here in her fifth period class to kind of see how they're doing. But we're gonna have to teach them how to break these problems down just like we did. So knowing that we'll have to teach them to do that, it's gonna require us to have some patience, cause they're not used to it. So, as long as we know that ahead of time. All right, Ms. Blanco, did you wanna share?
Kind of a brief plan that we have, but like, if you go back to the drive, where all the documents were, I think it's individual report, student individual report.
Okay.
Yeah, so all I did right there is for the ones that took it, color coded them like low, middle, high. Our biggest ones are the low and the middle, and so if we do that boot camp, which right now tentatively the dates that we had looked at was maybe that 3-day week, which is that last week of March, because and if we need to add additional dates, we would do that closer to when they take it.
So tell me how that would look.
If the three of us split up into rotations, one of us would take like the low group, middle group, high group, or they would rotate amongst the three of us. Or it could be even something like, since Miss Lide is more comfortable with the Desmos strategies, when they go to her station, they'll focus on the Desmos strategies. So maybe a little bit similar to what Mr. Raimond and I did for the SAT. When they get to Miss Mason, she can focus on the concept stuff. But also, if we're gonna do all 3 levels and she's gonna see the concept, then that would be breaking down the concept to the 3 levels as well. And then another rotation could be the testing strategy. So if we're gonna start incorporating that a little bit, then having a rotation for that would be good.
Okay. So if you do it at the end of March, when would it be done again? And what SCs would be the focal point for March? And how is that gonna be broken up?
I think for the March one,
Are we
if
gonna-
there's a checkpoint before then, after the ones that Miss Mason covers in that like week, we could maybe, if they've gotten those, we can go off of like the next couple of readiness standards that were low. Use those for the first boot camp. Or if, at the checkpoint, we're still seeing that there's a TEAC that maybe they still haven't grasped, then we'll include that one in there. And then as far as the second round, I think we said maybe the week before, that way it's more fresh on their minds, or?
Yeah, cause we did it the week of the exam, and it was just too much all at the same time. I mean, they did great, but I think by doing it the week before, maybe later in the week, that if they have questions and things like that, we would be better able to help them before they take it.
Okay.
So like maybe the 18th or 19th?
Yeah,
Or
like
thinking
sometime,
even the week before that.
maybe the week of the 15th, or the 8th, the 8th, I guess, cause they're taking it on the 24th, correct?
Right.
So,
week of April 15th,
that would be 2 full weeks after we do the initial boot camp.
and when you say boot camp, you're just talking about 1 full day of it, or are you talking about 3 days? What are you talking about?
It would be,
It could be half days, right? Cause I
I
think,
mean,
or,
I would rather do it through a class, maybe add it, I'm not sure, but take the class on that, over on Tuesday,
I tried to pull up the calendar, but it's not coming over. for
Okay.
me, so I
if
apologize.
we, I took a class on Tuesday, and that same class Friday, and try to hit all the Desmos stuff,
Okay.
and then.
So it's just a matter of collaborating with the Avid teacher, since
That-
all of those students will run
Right.
through there?
And that way, Ms. Mason could go ahead and continue.
Right,
With
okay,
what
I
she
like
said.
that, I like that. And we just, get a half-day sub or get a sub for,
I'm off second, so, it would be, what is it, 1, 4, and
5.
7?
1, 3, 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? Or your algebra 1.
1, 2, 4, and 5?
Yeah, 1, 2, 4, and 5. Which
Mhm.
date were you thinking?
Well, that week, since it's a 3-day week, I think they said it was gonna be a BAC,
Uh-huh.
okay,
so we could do it on the block days, like the Tuesday and Wednesday, if we choose to do it.
Are you talking about the late March or the second one that we're doing?
The late March one.
Okay.
is that March 29th?
It's
26, 27,
yeah.
before they're out, and we're out for Good Friday.
So it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
So
Yeah.
26 is Tuesday?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so Tuesday and Wednesday, because those are different students,
Right.
okay?
Um,
And her classes are, 1, 2, and 4, and then,
oh, so fast. Can you think
So,
about
so
that?
yeah,
5, 6, and 8.
well, I guess if we're doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I don't know if we're
Well,
gonna have.
as long as they're all in there, I just take the classes that she has, I guess.
Mhm.
She has what classes?
She's off 3rd and 7th.
Okay.
The other teacher?
The average teacher. Okay. Now, either we can ask to do a swap, where she covers your classes,
Oh, I
And
didn't
maybe
think about
do
that. And
a-
maybe do a test or something.
or do,
Plan.
cause she said she had some career, planning,
Mhm.
math career planning that she can share.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, that would
work.
be easier to make
Yes,
sure that you both
absolutely.
get your
Uh-huh.
conference period and, she can do something that will hopefully
That
enhance the
sounds good,
kids.
okay.
So
Now-
you're thinking Monday, it would have to be 2 days though, so you can hit all
Well,
kids.
to be honest, I mean, if at all possible, I really need, cause the boot camp we did was a little over 3 hours.
Mm-hmm,
And we went over the things that were basic, pre-basic, and it was successful, but, I mean, there's a few other things, so if we just did the one class, it's only an hour and a half. But then if we did the Friday along with it, that would be close to what we had, completed in the boot camp for
But
the
then,
retesters.
so that week we wouldn't have a Friday, no.
I mean, Thursday, that's
It,
what.
it looks like it's a BAB, not a BAC,
Oh, it's a
Oh,
good week.
which is weird.
mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay.
I would have fewer algebra classes than normally, if
Yeah,
that's,
cause you only have 5th.
So it would only be a day that you have it.
so it'd be that Wednesday.
Okay, it may be a pull-out situation,
Okay.
because we're talking about 58 kids.
Mhm.
And, if we set it up to where we have stations in the cafeteria and be done by first lunch.
So when we say there's only 15, does that, what's that?
58.
Oh,
58.
there's a 15, I'm like,
No,
wow.
58.
I teach 2 kids every class.
Okay,
But I think, I know for the kids that we worked with earlier, their success came from decimals.
okay.
No,
Yeah, we're not negating that, we're just trying to find out a time to do it.
just, but if I could have about the same amount of time, that would be awesome.
Okay, so yeah, we'll probably just have to do a pull-out,
Okay.
do a pull-out on an A day,
Okay.
so. Ms.
So kinda
Gracie
like what
can
we
do-
did,
Mhm.
okay,
But it would be in the cafeteria, cause it'd be on a larger scale.
right.
And I mean, something, since there are almost 60 kids, if we do the first rotation, like if we did do that, like Tuesday and Wednesday, a half day Tuesday, we take half the kids and split them amongst the 3 of us, so, I don't know, like 10 kids each, and then on that following day, we do another 10 kids each, and so that would,
Mhm.
so it's also.
Give them more one-on-one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
we like the idea of the rotation, since we're all gonna have different ways of communicating the math, as opposed to dividing them up by these groups and just assigning them to one teacher per group.
Okay, sounds good. So, our plan moving forward after today, we already have the PowerPoint for you all to get started. You'll run those problems on 4th sheets, so they can put them in the notebook, and also flesh out the problem just as we did here. We'll communicate with Mr. Miller to, begin allowing time for students to work on graphing, A3B, A3C, A3D, but we're gonna roll it out 1 TEK at a time. And also in Avid, we're gonna ask if she gives, 20 to 30 minutes for students to work on Delta Math. And for those students that are not in algebra, can just work on their, Ed Ready that they already have assigned.
The Delta Math, would that be the same TEAG focus as with Mr. Miller? So that first week back would be, I have it written down somewhere, the was it A3C?
A3B, A3C, A3D.
Okay, so would that be the same Delta Math assignment for both of those classes, and they can just?
Well, it depends. Now, on student fatigue, do you want them working on the same thing and finishing it, or do you want them doing different things?
I think the same thing is better,
Okay.
and that way they
And you
can,
just
they can get a sense of accomplishment, making sure they finish each week,
Mm-hmm.
each TEAG.
So even if they go, let's say they finish it up in physics, when they get to, Avid, they just work on Ed Ready,
Okay, that would be good.
But I think giving it to them in smaller chunks won't be so overwhelming. We just want them to practice. We want them to practice. Okay, well, good job. Well, it is officially spring break. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful break, and good job.